My Lords, for 6 years in the early 90s, I was a priest in Notting Hill in the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, and I never lived in a place where the vision of levelling up was quite so necessary and quite so localised. The very wealthy were often living cheek by jowl with the very poor, and meanwhile, looking north from one of our churches was the unmistakable sight of a brutalist 24-floor block of flats on Grenfell Road, which 25 years later was to become the scene of an unspeakable, though sadly not quite unimaginable, tragedy. Making buildings safe for leaseholders has since become a priority for the government, which is to be welcomed. But as the Noble Lord indicates, this support remains both limited and partial, creating a new distinction between the haves and have-nots of leaseholding when it comes to the most basic of principles that the homes in which we live and work and raise our families should be safe. I happened to meet one of those leaseholders, the have-not leaseholders, this morning, for whom insuring his flat, let alone selling it, has become virtually impossible. My friend Graham Tomlin, Bishop of Kensington, during the unfolding of those terrible events in June 2017, has written movingly in this regard. He speaks of how a pattern of moral compromise had become embedded in parts of the construction industry, as revealed by the public inquiry into the Grenfell tragedy, and goes on to suggest a firming up on the responsibility of developers to make good their work along the lines of the Earl of Lytton's amendments. And his insights have been fed into the second of the 5 basic principles of the Archbishop's Housing Commission, that good housing, quote, should be sustainable, safe, stable, sociable and satisfying. One of the very few cases I still vividly remember from my original legal training is the landmark decision of Donoghue and Stevenson, 1932, involving a Mrs. May Donoghue discovering a decomposed snail at the bottom of her bottle of ginger beer, and a Mr. David Stevenson, the owner of the Ginger Beer Company. This famous snail resulted in a bout of gastroenteritis for Mrs. Donoghue and a rather hefty fine for Mr. Stevenson, while simultaneously forming the surprising basis of our modern law of negligence and of a duty of care which doesn't depend on a direct contractual relationship between the parties involved. So how odd and morally indefensible, more than 90 years on, that the construction industry has been able to allow metaphorical snails to slide into its ginger beer bottles, to be negligent bordering on reckless when it comes to basic principles of safety, without a straightforward system of remediation which places responsibility where it patently lies. The Noble Lord's amendments seem to me both right and practicable in that regard, given the idea of a levy to the remediation fund, which helps answer the concerns of affordability. Developing new confidence in the construction industry and driving up its standards will also help protect the long-term reputation of the industry itself, which can only be a win-win for all concerned, or at least for all committed to the vision of good housing rather than a race to the bottom. I therefore wish to support the Noble Lord's amendments and the principles behind them in this crucial area of our national life.